In the 1920s, in the bustling Greek neighborhood of Astoria, Queens, New York, there was one simple yet legendary soup that could feed a family of 6 for 3 full days straight. No meat, no chicken stock, just white beans and plain water. On a cold November evening, if you walked past those old tenement buildings and caught a whiff drifting from an open window, you'd smell it simmering in every single kitchen. That thick, warm aroma of beans slowly bubbling on the stove since morning. This wasn't the glamorous Greek food you see in travel magazines today. No spit-roasted lamb, no honey-drenched pastries. This was real survival food, immigrant food, humble, honest, and life-saving. These were the meals people cooked when all they had left in their pockets was hope and a sack of dried beans. Greek families arrived in Astoria with recipes carried in their heads and almost nothing else. They worked the docks, unloading ships, scrubbed office buildings after hours, and sent every spare penny back home to Greece. And every night in those cramped kitchens, they created food that kept them going, day after day. Some of these dishes you've probably never heard of. Others sound so basic they hardly seem real. But every single one tells the story of people who simply refused to give up. This is what they actually ate. And some of it might just surprise you.
Fasolada was the true backbone of life for Greek immigrants in Astoria. Nothing extra, just white beans, water, a splash of olive oil, and, if you were really lucky, one single tomato. Mothers would set a huge pot on the fire before dawn, long before heading out for their shift, and the beans would simmer all day long on the lowest flame. By evening, when the father came home from the docks and the children returned from school, the entire apartment would fill with that warm, comforting aroma whispering, "We're home, we're safe." There was never any meat in the soup. It cost a fortune. But the beans cooked down to a creamy, thick richness that gave the feeling of real fullness. It fueled them with energy for the next 12-hour shift. Kids ate fasolada 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week. The dish was so common, they affectionately called it the national dish of survival. One big pot stretched across several days. You just added more water. And when the cupboard was completely bare, there was always fasolada. Beans never judged you, never asked for money. They simply kept feeding you, giving you the strength to keep going in a foreign land.
Lentil soup with vinegar. In the winter of 1923, when wages plummeted and rent stayed stubbornly high, lentil soup became a daily miracle for Greek families in Astoria. Lentils cost even less than beans, cooked faster, and burned far less firewood. But the real secret was vinegar, a completely free ingredient that worked wonders. Greeks couldn't afford ham hocks or beef bones, so right at the end of cooking, they stirred in just a couple of spoonfuls of vinegar. That sharp tang woke up the whole pot in an instant, turning it bright, alive, and truly appetizing. The soup stayed thin, the lentils soft, but the vinegar gave it real character and bite. Come evening, the whole family sat down at the table, one hand holding a chunk of bread, the other a spoon. Old-timers in Astoria still talk about how their mothers guarded the vinegar bottle like it was gold, because in a way it was. It turned poverty into flavor. This soup didn't just fill bellies, it lifted spirits and reminded everyone that even in the hardest times, you could make food feel intentional and special.
Horta, boiled wild greens. Early spring, Greek women would head into Astoria Park with bags and sharp knives. They weren't picking flowers, they were gathering a free dinner. Young dandelions, chicory, wild mustard, anything that grew on its own. The bags would return home heavy, like a true treasure. At home, they'd simply throw the greens into boiling water, cook them until tender, carefully squeeze out the bitterness, and then generously douse them with olive oil and lemon, if there was any in the house.
The taste was earthy, slightly bitter, but incredibly fresh. In a neighborhood where every penny counted, this free greens was a true blessing. The kids would wrinkle their noses at first, but the mothers stood their ground. Eat your horta. It makes you strong and healthy. This greens replaced vitamins and medicine when there was absolutely no money for a doctor and helped keep the whole family robust, even during the hungriest months. Olives with bread and onion. In the 1920s, olives with bread and onion weren't just an appetizer. They were a full dinner for the whole family. On one plate, they'd place a handful of salty olives, a large piece of bread, thinly sliced raw onion, and if they were lucky, a drop of olive oil. After a long workday, everyone would sit around that single plate and eat in turns, tearing off bread, taking an olive, biting into onion to cut the saltiness. It sounds incredibly simple, but when you're tired, hungry, and broke, that simplicity became true salvation. The olives provided salt, the bread soaked up the oil, the onion added sharpness and freshness. Old men of Astoria still remember Friday evenings when the paycheck didn't stretch to the end of the week, and this exact meal helped them survive until Monday. The father always said, "We eat what we have, and we are grateful." Gigantes, giant beans. They were enormous white beans that looked so hearty they could feed you just by the sight of them. They were bought dry at the corner store, soaked overnight in cold water, and the next day baked in the oven with tomatoes and olive oil. No bacon, no sausage, no expensive herbs, just beans, tomatoes, and oil. They were baked slowly and for a long time until the beans became tender and the sauce grew thick and rich. The aroma spread throughout the entire tenement hallway, reminding everyone of home, family, and care. They were eaten warm with bread. The sauce was tangy and rich. The beans melted in your mouth. One large baking pan fed 6 people, and the leftovers the next day tasted even better. This dish created the feeling that you had more than you actually did and gave you strength to continue the hard life in Astoria. Revitilla, or chickpea soup, was made when someone in the family was sick, sad, or just too exhausted after a hard shift. Only chickpeas and water, simmered for hours until creamy, plus a pinch of thyme. The soup came out simple, almost flavorless, but incredibly tender and gentle on the stomach. It required no effort. You could slowly drink it, dip bread, and feel like you were being wrapped in care. Grandmothers believed it had healing power, not magical, just warm and soothing. They'd cook a large pot on Sunday and eat it all week. Each day the chickpeas grew softer, the broth thicker, and by Friday the soup turned into almost a tender pudding. It was love in its purest form, without extra words or expensive ingredients. Lahanorizo, cabbage with rice. Lahanorizo proved that from minimum ingredients you could create a true miracle. 1 head of cabbage, a cup of rice, water, and a spoonful of oil, that was the whole recipe. The cabbage was roughly chopped, boiled until soft, then rice was added directly into the cabbage broth. The rice absorbed all the flavor and aroma, becoming soft and filling. The dish turned out warm, cozy, and very satisfying. It was made on cold winter evenings when the heating wasn't working and bills were piling up. The cabbage provided volume and sweetness. The rice provided fullness. Many old-timers still claim that this simple pot tastes better than any restaurant dish. It warmed not only the body, but also the soul.
Fried zucchini slices. Zucchini grew everywhere, in small gardens behind buildings, on windowsills, and in tiny flower beds. They were picked young, thinly sliced, and fried in olive oil without any breading. The edges became golden and crispy,
while the center remained soft and tender. They were eaten hot right from the stove or cold the next day. The taste was clean, slightly sweet, and incredibly fresh. Children would steal slices before they even made it to the table. Fathers would take them to work wrapped in paper. If lots of zucchini grew, they would always share with neighbors.
Honest, real,
This was food
completely
straight
free.
from the earth. Honest, real, and completely free.
Boiled octopus with vinegar. At the docks, octopus was sold for almost nothing. Americans barely bought it. Greeks knew what to do with it. Boiled in a large pot of salted water with thyme for hours until it became tender and sweet. Then they cut it into pieces, drizzled with vinegar and a drop of oil. The taste was pure sea, salty, fresh, with a bright tang from the vinegar. They ate it with their hands, standing up after their shift unloading ships. This was true working man's food, which reminded them of faraway Greece and gave them strength for a new day. One octopus could feed the whole family and still leave a feeling of celebration.
Sardines on the grill or frying pan. Sardines were the true people's fish. Small, cheap, sold by the dozens at the market on Steinway Street. They were bought fresh in the morning and cooked the same evening. Some fried them on a small grill, others in a frying pan with a drop of oil. The skin would char and get crispy, while the inside remained soft and fatty. They were eaten whole, with bones, with bread to soak up the oil, and sometimes with a wedge of lemon. Mothers always told their children, "This is brain food, it makes you smart." These little fish saved families when meat was completely unaffordable, and gave them strength for hard work. Rice with caramelized onion oil. Onions were sliced very thinly and fried in olive oil until almost black. The oil became sweet, smoky, and incredibly aromatic. The cooked white rice was then drizzled with this dark oil on top. The dish looked like a mistake, but tasted like a true masterpiece. The rice absorbed all the aroma and turned golden, rich, and slightly bitter. This proved that money wasn't necessary, just skill in handling fire and time. Greeks brought this trick from the old country and taught it to their children. In Astoria, it saved them when all they had in the house was rice and onions. Trahana was brought from Greece in small burlap sacks, tiny dried balls of wheat and fermented milk. They could be stored for years. At home, they were boiled in water or broth until thick and creamy porridge with a slight tang. They ate it with a spoon, sometimes adding a sprinkle of cheese. The taste was unique, earthy, tangy, and deeply familiar. This dish saved them from homesickness. One smell transported them back to Greek villages and childhood. Grandmothers prepared it with tears in their eyes because trahana wasn't just food, it was a real piece of home in cold Astoria. Yellow split pea puree, fava. Yellow split peas were boiled for hours until completely broken down, then mashed into a smooth, silky puree with olive oil and pieces of onion. The result was a thick golden mass that they spread on bread or ate with a spoon. One large pot lasted for several days. The taste was mild, slightly sweet, and very filling. This was one of the most ancient and cheapest staples that Greeks had known for centuries. In Astoria, it became a true salvation, simple, nutritious, and incredibly convenient for a large family. Stewed bread with tomatoes. Stale bread was never thrown away. They made a full dinner from it. They broke it into pieces, tossed it into a pot with water, tomatoes, and a drop of oil. The bread swelled up, the tomatoes broke down, and it became a warm, thick red stew. It looked modest, but tasted like true comfort. The bread provided volume, The tomatoes provided brightness, the oil provided richness. Families ate this when the cupboard was almost empty, and all that remained was yesterday's bread and a can of tomatoes. It reminded them nothing should go to waste.
Avgolemono, egg lemon soup with rice. In Astoria, avgolemono was much simpler than in modern restaurants. Rice, water, 1 egg, and 1 lemon. The rice was boiled in salted water, then beaten egg with lemon juice was slowly drizzled into the hot broth. The soup turned out light, slightly creamy, and refreshing. It was made when all that was left in the house was 1 egg and 1 lemon, and it always felt like an act of great care. The lemon awakened the taste buds, the egg made the soup tender, and the rice provided fullness. Mothers would say, "This is food for those who are recovering."
Baked pumpkin with olive oil. Pumpkin was cut into thick slices with the skin on, arranged on a baking sheet, drizzled with olive oil, lightly salted, and baked slowly in the oven. The edges caramelized. The flesh became sweet, soft, and very aromatic. 1 large pumpkin would feed the whole family for 2 or 3 days. They ate it warm with bread or cold the next day. In autumn, when pumpkins were cheap, this dish was made 2 or 3 times a week. It proved that vegetables could be the star of the table, not just a side dish. Stuffed peppers with rice only. Peppers were cleaned, then filled with rice mixed with tomatoes, herbs, and olive oil. No meat, no cheese. They were placed upright in a pot, a little water was added, and they were baked until soft. The peppers became tender, the rice absorbed all the juices and flavors. The result was a bright, warm, and very satisfying dish. It was made on Sunday and eaten all week, hot, cold, and even for breakfast. It was a way to stretch modest ingredients into a real family celebration. Boiled potatoes with lemon and oil. Potatoes were simply boiled in salted water until soft, cut into pieces, and generously drizzled with olive oil and lemon juice. No butter, no cream, no bacon. The potatoes turned out fluffy on the inside, bright and fresh on the outside. Fathers after 12-hour shifts at the docks would close their eyes after the first bite and just exhale silently. The food spoke for itself. It was a warm, filling, and very honest dish that saved them on the most tired days. Plate with cheese and olives. This was the moment when the family allowed themselves to feel almost rich. A small piece of feta, a handful of olives, bread, and a drop of oil. Everything was beautifully arranged on one plate and shared among everyone. The cheese was salty and crumbly, the olives were bitter, the bread soaked up the oil. This was the evening ritual of conversation and rest after work. Even 1 piece of cheese for 5 people created a feeling of celebration and unity. Chickpea puree with garlic. Chickpeas were boiled until soft, then mashed with a fork along with garlic, olive oil, and lemon if available. It became a thick, aromatic paste that they spread on bread or ate with a spoon. 1 jar lasted for 3 meals. This was real protein when there was no meat. The garlic made the flavor bright and memorable. They made large batches. It stored in the icebox and only got tastier the next day. Tara mosalata, fish roe dip. Salted fish roe was mashed with soaked stale bread, oil was added, and everything was whipped into a delicate pink creamy mass. 1 small jar would stretch for an entire week. The taste was oceanic, salty, and deeply familiar. Greeks knew how to turn what Americans considered trash into a true treasure. They ate it on bread on Fridays, and every bite reminded them of the Mediterranean Sea. Rice with milk. Rice was boiled in milk with a pinch of salt until it reached a creamy consistency. It became a tender, soothing porridge. It was given to children when they were sick or when there was nothing left in the house. The taste was soft, warm, and very comforting. This was food for late evenings and hard times, simple, gentle on the stomach, and full of a mother's love.
Tea with bread and sugar. When the cupboard was completely empty, all that appeared on the table was hot tea, a piece of bread, and 1 spoonful of sugar. They dipped the bread in tea to soften it, sprinkled it with sugar, and ate it very slowly, tiny piece by tiny piece. It didn't fill them up, but it gave warmth and a little bit of sweetness. Mothers smiled at their children and pretended they weren't hungry themselves. This was what helped them survive until the next paycheck.
Leftover bean broth with bread. At the end of the week, when all the beans were eaten, the broth was never thrown away. They reheated it, crumbled stale bread into it, and waited for it to turn into a warm, thick mush. No beans, no vegetables, just cloudy, aromatic water. But even that had flavor. Grandmothers would sit at the table and calmly say, "This is enough. We have everything we need." And in that moment, they truly felt that way, because survival isn't about abundance, it's about being grateful for even the smallest things.